one of the local parks of the city of Chicago, in my Chicago Park District, and I noticed this track, and I went out there and started walking around and doing that, and a very nice man came, and he was the coach. Well, I had him and knew him, of course, because I'd had some PT by going to gymnasium, we called it those days, and he was the track coach, the wrestling coach, and the gymnastics coach, and was a very nice guy. And so he got me running cross country, and I became very successful at it. I got a nice letter that I'd been awarded a 2-year honor entrance scholarship for $600. The tuition in the college was $100 a quarter. So I won 2 years tuition, and I became on the track team and began winning individual races for on individual meets, but never was good enough. I only won one time that I placed in the Big Ten conference meets, and that was the first race I ever won. Ever run in. July 3rd, 1942, the draft was on, and I sure as hell wasn't going to go on the draft. So I went down on Jackson Boulevard to the Army Air Corps and enlisted as an aviation cadet. I was deferred by agreement till I finished college. I was going to be a senior, and they called me up. And my birthday was on February 18th, and my mother and pop had Shirley over for them because we knew that we were going to be married someday. So here I was, and 3 days later I was in Miami Beach, and at that birthday I'd always wanted a Movado watch, and on the back of this you can maybe take it over, you can see what it says. And I wore this overseas, wore it in training, and largely most of the time overseas. Instructors were civilians, and I had a really neat guy, his name was Randall, from Wisconsin, and he came from a fairly wealthy family, and his family had done everything he could for him and got so he could learn to fly, because he wanted to learn to fly, and he was really good. And so I soloed in due time and did the stuff. And at the end of the training, the schools were still so backed up that the only part of our class was advanced, so they held me over for another 5 weeks training in a PT Fairchild PT-19 with another instructor who had 2 students, and each one of there were about 20 or 25 of us that didn't go on, maybe more. And this guy was a real flyer. He'd been with Chenault in their flying circus in the 20s and really knew how to fly an airplane. And so he taught me how to fly acrobatics like I'd never known before, and just was wonderful, you know. I wasn't a very good acrobatics guy. I did these a lot and did them a lot better. So that when I went to the basic flight school in Newport, Arkansas, my instructor, I was one of he had 2 students. We were his first students after he got his wings. And we flew this BT-19, which was a 2-position prop, and we went up, and we did these things. He said, "Now you do them." Well, we did a spin, Well, the guy I'd been with before, we didn't even knew how to fly. So you would fly this plane up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet and put it in a 2-spiral spin and come out. So I put it in and I tried to 9,000 feet. And he said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I want to get a little more altitude." Because we'd done some of the other things, and he had said, "Well, I don't want to do it anymore. You're fine with those." So I went on. I said, "I'm going to have fun with this guy." He was a real nice kid, not much older than me, but a big guy. And I put it in a spin and held it in there till 3,500 feet and pulled it out. I thought he was going to die. I was just having fun. July 3rd, 1944, at 10:30, we took off from LaGuardia Airport. And we flew to Gander, Newfoundland for breakfast and refueling. Flew across to the Azores, refueling. And that same day flew to Casablanca, landed about 1:30 in the morning. I stayed 3 days while they were processing us in Casablanca. Flew to Algiers, 2nd Troop Carrier Squadron, and we began to take off. We were flying. We didn't have any training in other planes, so we got our learning as co-pilots in C-47s. And I was very fortunate to get into this particular squadron, but the Merrill's Marauder, the object was to take a town called Myitkyina, Mytkina, which was a city, and that's the place where we were flying supplies down to, but also we were also dropping. Merrill's Marauders were down there by that time, but the 2nd Troops Carrier Squadron were the ones that developed the technique of parachute dropping supplies. Nobody had ever flown the Hump before 2nd Troop Carrier Squadron got over. By the time they got started, then there was the other 2 squadrons of the same group, and others kept coming in. When I got there, there were a whole bunch of guys. The Hump is these very, very high mountains, 15, 16, 17, 18,000 feet, to get from India to China. The C-47, which is a DC-3, was only equipped to fly about 10,000 feet. They only went 10,000 feet because there was no reason to go fly any higher, flying past the United States. So, in order to fly in the Army Air Corps, when you reach 10,000 feet, if you were flying, no matter what you're flying, a Flying Fortress or a Liberator bomber or a P-51 or a P-40, when you got to 10,000 feet, you went on oxygen. There was no oxygen on these planes. So they had to install oxygen, give them masks, and in order to get to 16,000 feet, it took them an enormous amount of time after they get out there because there wasn't enough oxygen for this type of airplane. But we flew it over. Sometimes I can remember we had a place where we were 1,000 feet above the field and it was in a valley. It was a couple thousand feet, and there was a whole stream of planes flying around this thing. And the Japanese, we had our troops on this side, shooting at the Japanese on the other side, and it was a big area, but you had to hit it on the right, on the left. As you flew into it, you had to fly it on the left side of the field. You didn't want to fly at the right side and give it to the Japs. And if you don't think that isn't a guessing game on when to let them go, during training, we were supposed to report anything. Certain of us during cadet training and so forth, 2 or 3 in each group. We didn't know who the other guy was, but we were to watch and listen for any foreign interference or any traitors and so forth. And we found them, and we wrote a letter each Saturday to this name at a post office box in the town where we were, and were to mail it ourselves the next day in town. And I guess that was on my record, so I was picked very often to fly flights that were OSS involved. At one point, the OSS sponsored a jungle survival school in Taro, Burma, which was, not very far from our field, but it was never any place where we had ever been. And we were issued special instructions on how to get there. And they had a big enough area to land. So they landed us. And we took this jungle survival school. And the man that conducted it was an Anglo-Burmese man who had a business in Burma, and he was in British uniform, being paid by the OSS of the United States, and he trained us in jungle survival. We became fast friends. We were asked to go in and pick up a lot of injured in this one place, and it was along the river. And landing the plane is not that difficult on short field landings, because you put down the flaps all the way, you come in with the gear down, and you go as slow as you can, and you come into it and just, and put the brakes on. Getting off is tough sometimes. Not always, but this one was the most you had to use all kinds of ingenuity. We got him in there. I got as far back in that field as I could, and it was downhill. I got that engine revved up full bore, had half flaps, and just got a roaring. I got everybody nailed down in the back. You hold those people down. And I said to the co-pilot, now we've got half flaps. When I say full flaps, don't question me, do it. And I'm talking about that loud too, over the roar of the engine. We took off, and immediately we went to 40 miles an hour or something, but we had to get about 90 miles an hour to take off normally, just without a normal flight. I got it up to whatever speed it was. I don't know what it was, but I was judging what we had to do. I was getting closer to that river, and there were a lot of rocks and a lot of this stuff. I said, hit it, and like that, and we went out and just got flying speed enough to stay out of the water, and it took, I don't know, a couple of miles before we could start climbing, and that's the most, that's the scariest thing I've ever done, but that's the airplane. That airplane is still flying. It's still doing things. It was the best airplane ever built. We moved back to Dinjan, to our original field, and checked out in C-46s, which are manufactured by Curtiss, I guess. And we had the benefit of the head pilot and a chief test pilot in the development of the C-46 to train us and teach us how to fly it. It had a record of having been a hard, nasty plane. It wasn't a good plane. There were a lot of crashes, a lot of people killed. And he taught us that the reason of that is they didn't know how to fly it. So he checked us out. And we then began flying C-46s on almost like an airline's flying. We had to, was not like we used to be with our other flights, take off and go and get there and get back and do what you can. We had to almost like file flight plans, and we had to get in line and get in formation and fly up and get in position, and then we were allowed to take a shot over the hump. The C-46 was a beautiful airplane. It was also a a 3-point. It was not a nose wheel. It had a lot of power. It had the same engines as the two engines, just like the B-29s did. They were really big engines, and they got up fast and went fast, and we were never in any danger of flying over the hump because we could fly a lot higher than we needed to, which we did. And it made the trip a lot faster, so I guess we had, I had maybe 20 some flights. Didn't fly every day, but I'm going to say somewhere between 20 and 25 flights in a C-46, and maybe more, maybe less. And I remember the last time over, coming back, one engine froze out, and we couldn't get it. It was just, and here we were flying over these mountains. I could just visualize, we bail out. We might never make it. Praying, really praying. We really were. And we got it going again. And went back, and when you have that kind of thing, you report it so that they can do something about it. Whatever they did, I don't know. But I came in and I said, that's it. I'm not flying this thing anymore. I'm not flying. The war's almost over. And it was my last flight. But we came into New York Harbor, and it was nighttime, and they didn't land because we didn't know this, but we dropped anchor in the harbor. We could see all the lights and the cars and everything. And it was because we were the first ship back, and they wanted to have a big water parade and all that the next morning. And that's what we did. And we got off, and they were giving us milk or something like that at the bottom. I want 2. I took 2 and drank them. And I called my mother as soon as I got Shirley, and I called my mother.